Sutherland and Colchester. It's really great to see lots of people from lots of different places. So welcome to everyone. So my name is Karen Larby and I am a trainer and a facilitator, and I currently work at an organisation called Campaign Bootcamp. We deliver campaigning training to people who are interested in any kind of social change work, especially people who are impacted by the issues that they want to campaign against. And campaign about, and I'm also the founder of POC in Nature, which is an online community that really gets people of colour talking about nature, being interested and engaged in nature, and having conversations about environmental justice. And I'm also an England advisory group committee member at RSPB, which is a nature conservation charity. So that's just a brief intro from me. We're here today to talk about climate justice is migrant justice, and this event is being hosted by the Joint Council for the Welfare of Immigrants. So I'll just do a brief introduction to the organisation. You'll have to bear with me because today this event was supposed to be chaired by Minnie Rahman, who is the Chief Executive of JCWI, but she sadly has another engagement tonight, so you have to make do with me today. She's really an amazing writer and campaigner, so I'm really honoured to be asked to chair this event today. I have very big shoes to fill tonight, so go easy with me. I've seen Minnie talk about the life-changing and life-saving work that she does at JCWI, so I just wanted to bring her name into the room, bring her spirit into the room, and I hope I can do her justice today by sharing what I'm hoping is going to be a really fantastic conversation. So a brief overview of what we're going to be doing today. One of our panelists, Flora, is going to speak about her work and her organisation's work for about 5 minutes at the beginning, and the other panelists are going to have the opportunity to respond to a couple of questions from me, and then there will be moderated questions from the audience. So the Joint Council for the Welfare of Immigrants is a legal charity that fights for change to our immigration system. Their vision is of a country where the benefits of migration are celebrated and shared, where no community, whether they're migrant or non-migrant, are left behind. They also run a phone line that helps undocumented people access status, and they provide really high quality legal advice for people who have been made to suffer by the immigration system, which is rooted in racism and injustice. And the experiences of the people that they work with it actually informs the work that they do in terms of campaigning for a better and fairer system for everyone. And their current focus is campaigning for new routes for status for undocumented people, and also scrapping the hostile environment. So it's a really great honour to have been asked to chair an event that's been hosted by the JCWI. So I would like to get some more interaction from the floor, from the audience, and obviously this week on the top of our minds is COP26 in Glasgow, and a lot of conversations are being had about the climate crisis, about the impact of the climate crisis on different communities, especially communities of colour, especially communities in the global south, and lots of negotiations are going on. And so I'd really invite you to share with us in the chat, again using the chat function. You just need to click to send to everyone so that everyone can see the comments. And I really invite you to share your hopes and fears. So what hopes are you bringing into the space today, not just in relation to the climate crisis, but just what hopes and fears you're bringing into the space in general. And I'll also, what I'll do is let you do that and have a bit of silence, and then I'll read some of them out so that we can hold the collective feeling for each other this evening. And I forgot to say, Yvonne, Flora and Angela, feel free to write some of your hopes and fears in the chat so that we can read them out as we introduce you. Thanks to all those who have already put their hopes in the chat and their fears as well. I'll let the chat box populate a bit more, and then I'll start reading some out. So if you've just joined us, we're just taking a minute to put in the chat our hopes and fears, anything that we're hoping for or anything that we have some fear around, so that we can really collectively hold the emotions that everyone is bringing in today. And then I'm going to read some out. So some of the hopes that are being brought into the space today is hope for legal protection for climate refugees, and hope for a kinder asylum seeker in this country, and that urgent measures are taken to ensure that the climate crisis is tackled. Thank you for sharing. And some people are bringing a lot of fear that big corporations and politicians, etc., are not taking the climate crisis as seriously as they claim to be. That's definitely a fear that's on a lot of our hearts as well. And that our political leaders aren't acting humanely or with the best intentions of all, or the best interests of all people in the country at heart. Some other hopes people are bringing in is hope for collective action and positive spaces, hopes for sharing stories, but also fears of a biased media and closed, angry minds. Thank you for sharing. We've got someone who has hope for equality and kindness and a good dollar of compassion, and hope that people understand the link between climate change and refugees and migrants. Thank you so much for bringing that in. And I hope that we can create a society that's based on the profound dignity for all of life, and thus leave no one behind. Thank you for sharing. Wow, we've got so many people in the room that I'm not going to get to everyone, but all of your hopes and fears are being held. I'm going to read another one. Concerned that those who have done nothing to cause this climate crisis are suffering the most, and I hope that may our actions match our words. Thank you. Another hope that is being brought into the space is that we will live in a borderless world, and a fear that we might not be able to see that achieved in our lifetimes. Thank you so much. Another hope that has been brought into the space is that climate refugees are given protection under the UN and climate reparations in terms of grants, not loans, which are given to low-income countries from the high-income countries who have contributed most to the climate crisis. and fear and concern about the anti-refugee bill that is being passed by Priti Patel. And I might read out a couple more. Fear that the world my child will grow, fear for the world my child will grow into. But I hope that it can be a more tolerant and caring world and action on climate crisis to give everyone a better world. Thank you so much for all of those hopes and fears that you've put in the chat. This is a ritual that I like to do at the beginning of conversations like this, because when we come into these we're forming a community today, even though our current configuration of Zoom doesn't allow us to see everyone, and we really make time to share pieces of our lives and what's on our heart with each other. We do it because we know that we all have value, all of our experiences matter. We share our sorrows and our hopes and our fears with each other, so that we can give each other comfort and also rejoice in the hopes that we share together. And so it's just recognizing that we all matter, every person matters, and together our lights shine brighter. So thank you so much for sharing some of the hopes and fears that you're bringing into the space. Because we can't see you all, it's difficult to have the community vibe, but it's really great to be able to see that there are people here. So what I'm going to do next is briefly ask each of the panelists to introduce a bit of their work and the campaigns that they're working on. So what I'll do is I'll give Angela and Yvonne a couple of minutes each, and then Flora a bit of a longer time to discuss the work she's doing. So I'll start off with Angela. Can you introduce yourself and let the audience know a bit about the work and the campaigns you're doing?
Okay, good evening everybody. My name is Angela Fonso and I am a member of Clean Air for Southall and Hayes. This is a campaign group that was born out of people's frustration about the air pollution from a gasworks site. For those of you who are unfamiliar, back in the 19th and early 20th century, gas was produced by burning oil on these industrial sites, and the gas was stored in the huge cylinder-like devices known as gas holders that you've probably seen across the country. So in around about the early 1970s, Southall Gasworks was decommissioned and for many years was used as a car storage depot for Heathrow Airport. But what happened, it's a huge brownfield site. A decision was made to redevelop it. It was bought by a property developer called Berkeley Group, who are huge in the southeast. The site is hugely contaminated with all the byproducts from burning coal. So that includes benzene, naphthalene, boggle. The site was so contaminated that in the past, there were basically underground fires that would spontaneously combust. And, you know, you cannot really underestimate how contaminated the soil is. So Berkeley Group had to remediate the soil, which they did from 2017 to 2019. During that time, we suffered horrendously with very toxic odours, and the local community started complaining on social media that they were experiencing health conditions such as asthma, nausea, and even more serious conditions such as cancer and pneumonia. And residents have linked their health conditions with the noticeable air pollution that we are inhaling. It is still going on today, even though Ealing Council, the local regulator, has signed off on the remediation of the soil. I was at the site on Saturday with a documentary filmmaker, and it was very blustery. And she is not from the area, and she noticed the odour instantly. And we were actually on the site by the children's playground that was opened last summer by Berkeley Group. Children were playing in the playground. And for me, it was quite a distressing sight because they were actually inhaling the chemicals that we could smell. And I really worry for their health. In actual fact, local residents have said it's affected my children's health. They're suffering from nosebleeds, asthma, sometimes they're not able to go to school. So it's a real environmental justice that Cash is campaigning against, and we are campaigning to hold Berkeley Group accountable, and we are putting pressure on Ealing Council, the regulator, to take legal action. So what we are asking, what we are demanding, is that Ealing Council treats the odours from the site as a statutory odour nuisance and serve an abatement notice. And this would be the first step towards getting Berkeley Group to do something about the unacceptable air pollution from the site. So we were set up as a campaign group in 2018. We've been campaigning for 3 years. And I would say one of the successes we've had is to actually make a company called National Grid aware that the way that Berkeley Group are remediating the site next door to a company called Cadent is really affecting the local residents. So they had to remediate the site where one of the gas holders stood on behalf of Cadent, and they actually built an enclosure over that site, and they installed an air filtration system. And as far as I'm aware, residents were not affected by air pollution. And a big difference in comparison to Berkeley Group, National Grid actually took the contaminated soil off site, whereas with Berkeley Group, the vast majority of the soil was treated on site. And the argument for that was to reduce environmental impact and to be more sustainable. But the impact on the community's health is immeasurable. And we feel ultimately that nobody in authority is taking us seriously. Public Health England were called in by Ealing Council in 2018. They reviewed the property developers' air quality data, and they concluded that there was no toxicological effect to the health of residents. But if that is the case, why are so many residents complaining about very similar health symptoms? And as I said earlier, some residents have actually died of pneumonia and cancer. This is how serious it is. The connection with migrants, I would really describe Southall as being a migrant town. We are predominantly inhabited by people recently arrived from South Asia or descended from migrants of South Asian origin. We also have residents who are from the West Indies originally and are descendants of West Indians, and also Somalians. So we're quite diverse, but predominantly of South Asian origin. You don't see many people of white European origin in the town of Southall. So we feel fundamentally what is happening is an environmental injustice, or to put it another way, environmental racism, because the local regulator, Ealing Council, have basically underplayed our experience. They've not taken us seriously. They've gaslit us. We were told back in 2018 that the odours that we were experiencing would clear in a few days. This hasn't happened. This has been going on for at least 4 years. And ultimately, we feel that the property developer, Berkeley Group, has the upper hand, and money is viewed as being more important than human health, plus the health of the environment, because we've said to Ealing Council that the Grand Union Canal, which runs adjacent to one of the boundaries of the site, is being polluted. A local resident actually filmed runoff from the site entering the canal. We've seen dead fish, dead birds, and dead vegetation. So it's clearly harming the environment, whatever is in the soil. We argue that the site hasn't been properly remediated, and we know that last year and also this summer, the property developer found pockets of contaminated land, which they've had to remediate. And it's a huge site, 88 acres. So we've never believed that they could do the job properly in 2 years. So, you know, as a campaign group, we're not going to stop, particularly as the problem is still ongoing. It really upset me to see young children playing and inhaling smells, which I would describe as being like a combination of petrol and diesel. And it is known that air pollution is a killer. It's the invisible killer. The chemicals that they are inhaling are damaging their respiratory systems, their hearts, their brains, their lungs. And the damage may not show up immediately. It could be 20 to 30 years, or by the time they hit middle age, that they will show the effects of inhaling the toxic air pollution.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Angela, for sharing about the work that you're doing in your community and all of the barriers that you're having to face in campaigning for this issue to be resolved. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Next is Yvonne. Can you tell us introduce yourself and tell us a bit about the work that you're doing?
Of course, most certainly. My name is Yvonne Blake and I am residing in Glasgow, Scotland. I am the co-founder of a migrant-led grassroots organization. We are called More Migrants Organising for Rights and Empowerment, and we campaign for asylum-seeking people's access to employment, education, and dignity. The reason why that is crucial, because Glasgow is a dispersal city. And for those who that might be unfamiliar to, it means that it's a city where the Home Office sends people who are seeking international protection. It doesn't matter where they arrive in the UK, which port, wherever they are sent to Glasgow. Now, the beautiful thing about that, it means that we have a large community. We have a community where we are connected. We have a community where we mobilize together, where we organize and where we campaign. I didn't think the Home Office envisages that. I thought that they felt that they were sending people to a very, very far place to isolate them. They had no idea, but I think it just backfired for them, and it's really beautiful. We campaign for four main things: for asylum-seeking people to access employment, education, decent housing, and to be treated with dignity. You might notice that my voice is hoarse because I've been shouting since Friday. So COP26 has been hosted in Glasgow. I've been on the streets Friday, Saturday, Sunday, yesterday, and today. So we've been shouting. So that's why my voice is sounding like this. So forgive me. So we campaign for those four main things. And the reason why we campaign for those is two main reasons. The hostile environment is designed to strip individuals of their dignity, individuals of their humanity. It's designed to relegate us to, I don't even know, not even to beggars. It's designed to relegate us to non-human, where we are dependent on charity, where we have to beg to survive, where we have no form of dignity or no form of autonomy at all. So we have been campaigning for people who might not be familiar, for people who are seeking international protection. The money that they're given each day, it was £5. It has been increased marginally, so it's about £5.20, or I don't even know. It has been increased marginally. Now, for people who, if you say people are going to go out for a meal, £5, you wouldn't even be able to buy a meal that is on offer on any menu. Now, this is what people have to live by. This is what people have to use to get the buses to go to the supermarket. So our main focus is that the immigration system is one that demonizes people, and hence the thread of all our campaign is around dignity. In relation to housing, asylum-seeking families have no choice as to where they live. And hence the reason why people have been some people might be in London, some people are in Scotland, some people are in Manchester, wherever. You have absolutely no choice over where it is that you live. That's one thing. Another thing is normally the homes that our communities are given, they are normally homes that are substandard. The first set of housing that were given when Glasgow became a dispersal city, it was the Glasgow City Council homes, and those were homes that were deemed uninhabitable for the people of Glasgow. I'd like you to pause and think about that. So these are homes that were deemed uninhabitable for the residents in Glasgow. These are the homes that our people were putting. Our children had to live into homes that were moldy, homes that were infested, homes that were filthy, homes that were cold. These are the homes that our children had to live in. And in relation to access to education, education up to secondary education, you're able to access that because education is not a reserved matter, it's a devolved matter. So Scotland has the political system is some matters are reserved, some matters are devolved. Immigration is a reserved matter, so it's the Westminster who makes the decision. In relation to education, so in Scotland, you can access education up to, like secondary level. In relation to tertiary level education, because it's, as I said, it's a reserved matter, you can, we say part-time, you can access part-time education. Now we've campaigned around ensuring that asylum-seeking community have access to education. So we started a campaign at the University of Glasgow. The University of Glasgow has an access program, they still have an access program, but the access program was advertised that for people who do not have the required qualification, just a minute, please. Sorry, the people in my house, they are just excited. So they're having a chat. So for people who, so the access program is designed to enable people who do not have the formal qualification to access university. Now the cost for the course, so you need to have 2 subjects. The requirement is that you have 2 subjects in order to start the university. Now the cost for each subject, I think it was £345, if I remember clearly. Now, if you're seeking international protection where you're given £5 marginal, under £6 a day, you have no access to employment, there's no way you'll be able to afford that amount of money. So we campaign, we had like a 2 years campaigns at the university to say that the accessible course is inaccessible for international protection applicants. And our demand was that for people who are in the system, that the course should be fully subsidized. We were successful with that campaign. So at this moment, it means that anyone in Glasgow or anyone who wants to attend the University of Glasgow wants to participate in the access program, that is fully subsidized, which is, I think that is really a good victory, because we cannot speak about, and I'm just going to speak a little bit about the climate crisis. We cannot speak about the climate crisis unless we speak about the migrant crisis. And the climate crisis is a racist crisis. It's racist in the sense that it's about the fact that certain people do not have access to basic needs, which is education, like Angela spoke about. Children don't have access to clean air. We don't have access to good housing. We do not have access to health. We do not have access to the basic needs. We don't have access to the ability to thrive. You know, earlier you asked about what our hopes and our dreams are. Some of them don't even have access to the part of our brain that allows us to dream, because we have been brutalized, we have been demonized in so many, every single way. Every system has been designed in such a way. Health, you're unable to access health. Education, you're unable to access education. Employment, you're unable to access employment. So it means that even your ability to think, even your ability to just dream, that has been robbed, that has been reduced. And that's why it's important when we speak about the climate crisis, we cannot focus on fossil fuel. If we focus on fossil fuel, then that is a distraction. We need to focus on people. It has to be centered around people. It has to be centered around people, communities that are most marginalized. The question has to be, how is it that the people who contribute less to this climate crisis, why is it that these communities from the global south, people who look like me, why is it that we are the people who are paying most? Why is it that we have become the sacrificial people? And those are the questions that we need to ask. It's a beautiful thing that we have, COP26 in Glasgow, and as a result, we've been able to mobilize. Saturday, I understood that we mobilized nearly 500,000 people on the streets, which was really beautiful. So there was an indigenous bloc, there was a migrant bloc. We've had a march today. We mobilized over 2,000 people. It was a migrant-led bloc, and there's been various resistance. And that's the beautiful thing about our people. That's the beautiful thing about our communities, that we are people who have always resisted. We are people who have always fought. We are people who have always fought for the future generation and for ourselves. A lot of people see the climate crisis, they have been saying that it's code red. And we've been saying we've been living in code red since Europe invaded Africa. So for us, code red is nothing new. We've been living in code red since Haiti. Today, Haiti has to pay colonial tax to France. If that is not code red, what on earth is code red? There are countries in Africa, French-speaking countries, who still pay colonial tax to France. The structure of the IMF, when developing countries are given loans, the extortionate amount of interest that countries have to pay. As a result, we're not able to develop our infrastructure, we're not able to build schools, we're not able to build hospitals. If that is not code red, what on earth is code red? When we are in a situation where our infrastructure is so unstable that women, young girls are not able to access education, if that is not code red, what on earth is code red? When we're in a situation where young men, young boys are not able to access a job, are not able to access employment, and their only option is they are vulnerable to exploitation, they are vulnerable to trafficking, and the prison system is there waiting for them. They become, it's as if the industrial complex prison system is designed to ensure that they benefit from young men, young Black men in particular. So when you have a system where, people are going to prison for 25 years, 50 years, if that is not code red, what is code red? And as I say, for me, if we don't speak about people, when we speak about the climate crisis, if it's not focused on people and it's focused on things, then that for me is a distraction, and it needs to be centered around people. It needs to be centered around the most marginalized. And we're not marginalized because we're victims. We're marginalized because there are systems of oppression that are designed to ensure that we are marginalized. There are systems of oppression that are designed to ensure that our voices are not heard. For example, this COP is the most exclusionary COP ever in the history of COPs. For starters, people from the global south were not able to access visas to come to the table to represent themselves, to speak about the issues that impact them. So when we speak about the climate crisis, we need to speak about it in relation to people. When we speak about loss and damage, it is in relation to people. It is in relation to people's hopes, people's dreams, young people who are being born. They're born in mosquito-infested areas, young girls who are being born, and the only hope is that they will be forced into child marriage. We need to speak about it, and until we speak about it in those terms, any other conversation is based on falsehood. And not only that, it is a travesty to speak about climate crisis unless we speak about the migrant crisis and racial justice. And that is the only way forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yvonne, for that introduction to your work, and also to the human impact of the climate crisis. Those are really powerful remarks. Thank you so much. And next is Flora. Would you like to introduce yourself and a bit about the work that you do, and how your group is campaigning around racial and climate crisis in the UK and elsewhere? Over to you, Flora.
Thank you so much, Corinne. And I'm just going to pick up from where Yvonne left. That was really powerful, what he said. And I'm coming from a group in Kentish Town West called the All African Women's Group, which is a self-help group. And we meet monthly, and at the Crossroad Women's Center. We are part of the Global Women Against Deportation, and we work with other groups in the center, and we are very, very much involved in the climate issue. All African Women's Group is made up of women from different continents, especially Africa. We have women from Congo, we have Nigeria, we have Zimbabwe, South Africa. Then we have women from India, from Pakistan, from Albania, and Mexico. We are made up of mothers who are single mothers, who are carers. We have, in our group, we have lesbian women. Many of us have fled persecution. We have fled rape and other torture, and domestic violence, poverty, and environmental destruction caused by climate change. At home, we are the main carers and a small-scale farmers relying on the land and doing agricultural work, which is mostly unpaid. Women look after the land, the animals, and plants. This is protecting and preserving the environment, but this work is not recognized. Do you know that in Africa, women grow 70% of their food? And in my country, where I come from, in Cameroon and in Kenya as well, most women do 80% of farming. But we do not get to own any land. Climate change causes drought, crop failure, lack of water, death of our animals, flooding, hurricane, rising oceans, and other disasters drive people off the land. The destruction of the environment is deliberate, driven by greed and profit. You know, then the multinational corporations grab land, and often the most fertile. They cut down forests, dump pollution and chemicals that exhaust our land. They grow cash crops for export, leaving our people with little or no food due to their greed. In Cameroon, where I come from, the eastern side of the country, the forest is mostly grown, and this forest is exported to France. And if you see the type of roads that the exportation of the forest has destroyed most of the roads, cause accidents, and as they're cutting the trees, they are not planting some. So there's a lot of deforestation that is going on. And it's not long ago I spoke to one of my sisters back home who has a group who encourage farmers to do most of the organic farming. And this sister was so angry because she was working with the government, and she discovered that the government was putting lots of fertilizers on the soil, and she resigned from her work and started a group. And I was speaking to her, as maybe some of you know, Cameroon is made up of English and French speaking side. Come from the English side where it is politically difficult. They have been 5 years without anything going on. The schools are not going on, and everything has stood still because of the political situation. So fertilizers, we are supposed to go through to this village, and because of the political situation, the fertilizers were held back, and the farmers registered the highest yields because they did not use any fertilizers, pesticides, or anything on the soil, and the food tasted wonderful. And she reported back to me, and I was really, really, really happy to hear that. And this is the type of thing that once the government keep pushing a lot of chemicals into farming, it destroyed the land, it destroyed the food. Yeah. Then in Uganda, we have many of our sisters in the group that come from, like, they said in their cases, 20,000 farmers were evicted from a government-owned forest in central Uganda to make the way for a British forestry company. Environmental devastation means more work for women. Deforestation in rural areas means women spend hours collecting firewood and finding clean water. These, along with war and armed conflicts, are what forces millions to flee our homes and risk our lives trying to get to safety. Mothers and children suffer most. We are more, for example, we are more likely to be poor, less able to escape, especially in the British Southern Cameroon. You discover that some of the villages, the young people, the young men, and they have escaped the area, leaving behind women and children. So the women have to do most of the work, most of the land that are abandoned. They struggle to do because they cannot escape as well. So wars kill millions, and it pollutes the air and water and the soil. Many women are raped in war zone countries like Congo, Rwanda alone. Millions of women and girls have suffered rapes and other brutalities. This government knows this, and politicians and celebrities sometimes condemn it. But when we claim asylum because we have been raped, we are being told that we are lying, or that so many women have been raped in our countries, and it is a normal part of life. So Western government promotes war and armed conflicts to steal our resources, robbing us from peace and prosperity to enhance their profit. Then they accuse Africa of not being peaceful, which they are the cause. So many wealth has been stolen from Africa and have never been acknowledged. From slavery to the colonial era, when our land and our most precious resources, like people, are being taken away. This is why we have the right to be here. We are here because the corporations and the Western government are still there robbing our countries. When we come to Europe, we bring our experiences and our struggles with us. For example, in our group, we share information about strikes and organizing against dictatorship in different countries. We are organizing to win our cases, our right to stay, to end deportation, to end destitution, to end detention, and to end the hostile environment. And we did do a survey where we just had a survey from destitution, which we found that 48% of the women asylum seekers had no income at all. 60% were classified as destitute. That is, they were living on less than 70%. a week, and all we are living below the poverty line. 44% were mothers of children under 18. Women were also asked why they were destitute. Many described severe hostility and discrimination against them as women, as mothers, and as rape survivors. We have recently won some victories. For example, a lesbian woman from Uganda whose partner was killed won asylum. Another woman was reunited with her children after 9 years. We are organizing against the Nationality and Border Bill and highlighting the impact on women and rape survivors in particular. We won't compromise. We won't accept so-called voluntary returns or the demand for just a limit on detention. We demand close down all the detention centers. We want money and respect for the work women as the primary carers in every society. In this way, we can serve people, the environment, and the whole planet. And I was really touched when Yvonne was talking, because I have done some studies in environment. And I used to always say that it is hard to deal with the environment without dealing with the people, because it is when you care for people that their mental state become aware of the environment. And once people are aware and they are well have everything, the security, and can have a home, like asylum seekers can have everything they need, then they will take care of the rest. Until people are taken care of, it is hard to talk about the environment. It cannot be isolated. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Wow, thank you so much, Flora, and thank you so much to Flora, Angela, and Yvonne for all your powerful remarks this evening. I've just been like scribbling away, trying to take as many notes as possible. Everything you're saying comes faster than I can write down. It's just, yeah, really rich and really wonderful. And when I was getting into campaigning at the end of university, I was really inspired by the All African Women's Group when I was younger, and the Crossroads Women's Centre, who houses the All African Women's Group. So it's really great to meet you, Flora, and thank you so much for sharing. So I have a couple of questions for, in particular, Angela and Yvonne, before we open it up to the rest of the audience. And you've talked about it in your presentations a bit, but I'd love to hear more about why you think that migrants and communities of colour need to be at the forefront of struggles for climate, migrant and racial justice. And it'll be really good for you to share more about the different tactics that the organisations that you work with use, and also how power and privilege play into this, and any damaging narratives that you've seen being used, and why these must be avoided. So I know that that's a really big question, but feel free to address any part of that you prefer. So yeah, either Yvonne or Angela, you can go first.
So if you just run the question again, I heard it, but what was the question? Sorry.
Yeah,
why
sure.
we feel that it's important that the voices of the people who are impacted are centered, and what are the tactics that we use?
Yeah,
and I'm not so
exactly.
sure we can speak about our tactics. I mean, so one of the thing for me, and I insist on in our group, because knowledge is power, and without knowledge, without information, it's difficult for you to campaign effectively. So our campaign is based on a rights-based approach. And a rights-based approach, it means that we know what our rights are, we're able to assert those rights. And so one, we know what our rights are and we're able to assert them. And secondly, we know where the gaps are and where we need to campaign to ensure that our rights are protected. Because outside of that, then it means that we would just be on the street with banners and we wouldn't know what we're campaigning for. So for us, it's important. Education is important. education is important. And for our type of education, it has to be popular education, education of the people, by the people, for the people. So it's not necessarily that and I have nothing against formal education, absolutely not. But what I'm saying is it is important that we are educated around the issues that impact us. And one of the things that we did when we realized that Glasgow was going to host the COP26, we started about last year, we've been having climate justice, migrant justice workshops. I knew very little about the climate. I was unable to articulate the connection. I knew that the climate crisis is a legacy of colonialism. I knew that. In my spirit, I knew that. I'm sure every Black and brown person know that. But the thing about it is that the way these things are written, the language that they use is to exclude you from the conversation. So even though in your spirit, you know it, you need to be able to articulate it in a way that it makes sense to other people. And also when you're articulating it, the very people who write these policies to exclude you, you can respond to those policies. So one of the things we did early on, since last year, we've been having migrant justice, climate justice workshops. And during those workshops, we explore the language being used. We explore what COP was. None of the people in our group knew what COP was, because we are all refugees, or we have never been to COPs. So we explore what COP was. We explore, that was the first time we learned about the Paris Agreement. And that was, then we learned about the negotiations, how do they work? And then we you touch on food sovereignty. It wasn't Flora who touched on food sovereignty. Where she is? She touched on food from Uganda. Yeah, Flora, you touched on food sovereignty. So we learned about food sovereignty. We learned about, the colonial history, colonial legacy. We learned also about the health, like we had the pandemic recently. We made the connections to those. So for me, one of the tactics that I personally, I'm an activist, but I'm a community development practitioner. So as a community development practitioner, as an activist, the most important legacy you can leave, or the best way to empower communities or to create environment that communities feel empowered, is ensure that people are equipped with the knowledge, people are equipped with the information, so they can confidently stand and challenge and speak truth to power. So for me, that is the like you say, the tactics that I use. One. Secondly, I ensure that I build solidarity with different communities, because all our struggles are interconnected, and we are not free until we're all free. So that another thing, all our struggles are interconnected. And while the working class community struggle might be one for, might be pension rights, but it is also an injustice. And Dr. King says injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So it's making sure that we are able to meet each other at a point where we are connecting all our struggles, because the reality in this war is that there's a 1% who owns the money, who owns the wealth, and who's trying to influence us. And as the 99%, it is imperative that we ensure that we have one voice, and our voice is that we are united. So for me, it's about unity, it's about education, and it's about ensuring that there are spaces where communities can be validated, communities are heard, and communities are held, communities are cared for. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, definitely. It's really great to hear about ways of campaigning that is about community empowerment, and really hearing about the unity and the political education and helping people feel affirmed and validated in their identities and in their struggles. Thank you. Angela, what would your response to that question be? Why is it that communities of colour and migrants need to be at the forefront of the conversation around climate justice? What are the tactics that your organisation has been using, and what are the damaging narratives that you might have seen being used, and how we can avoid them?
Okay, I would say first and foremost The community that I belong to is predominantly brown and black. We are being gassed in our own homes. We are dying. We are fighting for our lives. So we have no choice but to campaign and be at the forefront of this, because it's happening predominantly in ethnic minority communities, not in white affluent communities. A few years ago, cash went to the property developers AGM, which was held in a very affluent place called Cobham in Surrey. What is happening in Southall in West London, which is essentially comprised of migrant communities, would not be happening in Surrey. Now, what is happening is being repeated across London, because the property developer, Bartley Group, own around about 30 gasworks in London and the southeast. So one of our tactics, if you like, was to gain prominence in the media. And it was a result for us that a Guardian journalist actually followed our story and didn't just publish one article. I think there are at least 3 articles in the Guardian. A big breakthrough for us was the Guardian following us for a period of a year and filming us and creating a documentary. And the reason why that was groundbreaking, people started approaching us and saying, the same thing is happening in my area. As a result of that video, we found out that communities in West Ham and Haringey and Bow in East London, you're talking about very deprived multi-ethnic communities, exactly the same thing is happening. So that led to the creation of an alliance of campaigners who are very concerned about the remediation of their local gasworks. And that has given cash greater prominence and put pressure on the local MP, who wasn't very interested. But when he realised, actually, people across London are complaining. Also in the suburbs, people are thinking, actually, there's a gasworks down the road from where I live, and I don't want this happening. Up until that point, predominantly white people living near gasworks were not interested in Southall, couldn't care less about Southall. Even though we're black and brown, we are invisible. So that has given us more of a national platform. The MP has created an all-party parliamentary group on gasworks. We had one meeting in April. We're putting pressure on him to hold another meeting. Through the Gasworks Communities Alliance that was set up, we held a conference on gasworks remediation, and that brought us the attention of the remediation industry. So we're in a place where people cannot ignore us. And now that the lockdown restrictions have been lifted, we are back to actually street protests. So we held one in West Ham, and that was very powerful. There is one due to take place in Southall on the 28th of November. So we're not stopping, because Ealing Council said that independent air quality monitoring was due to begin last August, and it didn't. Now we've been told that air quality monitoring will begin sometime soon, but we've got to keep on the pressure. Flora made a really good point about greed, and it's greed that has caused ill health of the most vulnerable people in society. I'm going to personalize this a bit. I used to work at the local college as a careers advisor. The vast majority of students came from a migrant background. We had a large percentage who were asylum seekers and refugees. And it was the greatest pleasure in my life to enable these students to make progression, to move on to university, to move on to higher level courses, to move into employment. But back in 2017 and 2018, I was being gassed in my place of employment by Berkeley Group. It was so bad. I used to go home and my home was full of the air pollution. I couldn't breathe. I was struggling. I started to panic and think, I feel so ill, I'm struggling to go to work, but if I take time off work, I'm going to be subject eventually to disciplinary action. So in the end, I made the decision to leave my job. And that saddens me because I enjoyed working with students. I enjoyed supporting them and helping them to move on to the next step. So my expertise and experience is lost. It's not likely that I'm going to be able to return to that kind of work because my health has been severely affected. I went to I called my GP the other day. I had a very bad chest infection. He's prescribed me one of these, okay? Lots of people in Southall will be prescribed one of these because they're suffering respiratory distress as a result of inhaling air pollution. You can't see it, but it's there. So let me just respond to the other points that you made. Damaging narratives. Well, the air pollution we know is having a damaging effect, even though we've been gaslit and told it's unlikely to have a toxicological effect on our health. It's not going to be long lasting. You know, none of that is true. We are told that the development is providing much needed housing to deal with the housing crisis. But the reality is this housing is not for the Southall community. You need around about 300,000 to buy a studio flat in one of the high rises that are going up on the gasworks development. Also in other parts of Southall to do with Crossrail, okay? These developments, in actual fact, are being marketed in the Far East. They are going to be essentially investment properties. Berkeley Group is very good at dividing and ruling in the community and funding community organisations, including a faith conglomeration who are helping migrants, undocumented migrants, and providing them with shelter. But this is the same organisation that is killing the community. They also support a health initiative called Let's Go Southall, and the funding has come from Sport England for that. So this is the same organisation that is killing people on the one hand, but on the other hand, supporting an initiative that is supposed to get the community fit and healthy. Well, you're not going to be able to get the community fit and healthy if the air pollution is not being dealt with. It's all a smokescreen to cover up institutional racism, to make the community think that they're benefiting from all the investment that's coming into Southall. It's absolutely shocking and disheartening. The term environmental injustice was coined in America to highlight what was happening to Latin and ethnic communities who lived near polluting industries. Well, the same thing is happening in the UK, in London, where I live. And I will continue to highlight this injustice. I've got no choice but to be on the forefront as a Black woman. There are times I think I'm struggling with my health and I know the pollution is affecting my health, but I bring it down to basics. If I can't go to work, then I can't pay my mortgage and rent. I can't look after my children as a lone parent. So I cannot step away from this battle, because it's not just me, even though I've personalised it. There are hundreds of people in the same position, and we are facing multiple disadvantages as ethnic minority people. We are more predisposed to diabetes type 2. We are more susceptible to COVID, and it's worse with COVID and air pollution. There is a link there. So fundamentally, what is causing this situation is greed, and the system that causes the greed. So I think you cannot look at how people are treated and are suffering without looking at the economic system. Yeah, I totally agree. You know, you can't sort of divorce climate justice from people. And it's important that the people who are disproportionately affected have a voice at the top table, which clearly hasn't happened at COP. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Angela, and thank you as well for being really generous and open and vulnerable and honest about the personal impact that it's having on you as well. And it is really important for communities of colour to be at the forefront of these conversations, because more times than not, it's, you know, a life and death situation for us, and it really does, as has already been mentioned, really impacts on the quality of life and our ability to dream and to have dignity and autonomy. So thank you so much. I just wanted to shift focus a bit so that we can talk about some solutions to these issues. And I was wondering again, Angela and Yvonne, what kind of solutions do you envision, or do you already see as well in the struggle for climate and migrant justice? And how do you think, what kind of messages or framing have you seen or would you like to see that really can help people to understand the interconnectedness of all these struggles? So as before, either of you can start.
I think fundamentally it's important that the people who are affected are listened to, and that their knowledge and expertise is implemented. As I said earlier on, we've been denied our experience. We've said time and time again, this air pollution is affecting us. I'm going to actually read a quote from a neuroscientist called Araceli Camargo of Centric Lab. And she was the first scientist who actually listened to us with respect and treated us with dignity and didn't gaslight us. And I think this is so important, what she has to say. There is no safe level of air pollution. Actually, you don't need science, just eyes. Knowing that toxic air affects health is like knowing that gravity exists. It's that common. No more data is needed, just action. And that's the plea that I would make to Councillor Peter Mason, who is leader of Ealing Council. We don't need any more data. You've gathered data from us over the last 4 years. It is time to take action and implement an enforcement notice against Barclay Group. Our lives matter, our lives count. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. That's a really simple solution there. So thank you so much for offering that. And I saw Yvonne, you unmuted a bit earlier, and yeah, what are the kinds of solutions that you envision and what kind of ways can we see these struggles as interconnected?
I just want to add to what Angela said, and that it's important that the voices of those who are affected. I personally believe that the only experts in matters are the people who are affected by those matters. You cannot have expertise coming from abroad or from some institutions to come and tell people on the ground. 1 minute. I'm getting like a flu symptom because I've been wet in the rain like 2 days. So I'm feeling a bit fluey. Sorry about that. You can't have people who have never been affected by the issues. They cannot, under absolutely no circumstances, they cannot be seen as experts. So the only experts are the people who are affected, the people who are impacted. And as Angela says, the scientist says, you don't need data. If the people who live there are saying that they are not well, the people who live there are saying that the air pollution is to that extent that children are becoming unwell, parents aren't able to go to work, there must be a system where we are listened to. And I think there must be some accountability that when communities bring matters to these or to these organizations or whoever these people are, and they are not listened to, there must be some accountability where counselors, those who are in power, they should account. So that's one. Secondly, in relation to the solutions, the people, we have the solutions. We have the solutions already. And it was really inspiring to see, in Glasgow, people on the street marching. We're saying, these are the solutions and you need to listen to us. We have made ourselves visible and it's important that you listen to us. And that is important, like what Angela said, they have been doing this work. You had journalists who were following their work for a very long time. I think sometimes the work that we do, because we are activists and we are not being paid, we are not paid activists, we do the work because we're in our community and we see that there's a need. And most of the time, the work that we do, it's an alternative and to ensure that we fill the gap that is being left by the charities that are being paid to do the work, the politicians who are not doing the work. So most of the times as activists, we are not paid. And it is important that there's funding available. It is important that our time is being paid for. It is important that our expertise is paid for, because it's only then we can be able to be at the table. We are able to invest more time, more energy, because we have to be doing so many things. You're a mother, you're at home, you're working, and it's in those time that, those little space that you have to squeeze activism in. So it's important that there's funding for this work. And when I say funding, I don't mean trickle-down economy where some organizations of European origin, they have the funding and trickle it down to us. We need to be given funding to sustain the work that we do. So that's what I'd like to say on this.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. That's actually a really brilliant point. So we've got about 15 minutes left of the session. So I'd like to open it up to questions for the audience. From the audience, we'll might take 1 or 2 questions, and they can be addressed to Angela, Flora, and Yvonne, or just one of them, or all of them in combination. So I think what's going to happen is that a staff member from JCWI is going to moderate the questions that have been submitted by the audience, and then we'll send them to me so that I can ask them of the panelists. So feel free to use the chat function, and I also think there's a Q&A function that you can use to ask questions of the panelists. So I'll just check in the chat to see if Ruth has submitted any questions. So we've got one question in the chat. do you have any tips for how people working in global health can incorporate this? So I'm assuming this is a question from Diana. I'm assuming, Diana, you mean how they can incorporate the interconnections between climate justice and migrant justice. So yeah, Angela, Flora, Yvonne, do you have any ideas about how people who work in global health can incorporate this conversation?
I'll respond to that. Just give me a minute, please.
Do either Flora or Angela have a response to that question?
I mean, I would say that, you know, people who work in global health don't make assumptions. I heard somebody talk at a MEDEC conference. People who are affected by the climate know their bodies the best. The medical community shouldn't be making assumptions about the right way to treat people. So the key is to actually listen to communities who are affected, work with them. You know, don't assume that the way of the medical professionals is the right way. So listening and understanding and being open-minded is key. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela.
Thank you, Angela. That was well said. What I'd like to say is for people who are working in global health is to recognize that ill health is not the absence of being unwell. Ill health is the inability to live well. Ill health is the inability to thrive. Ill health is the inability to be able to eat properly, to exercise, to have access to good food, good quality air, to have access to green space where people can go for a walk, people can go cycling. So when we look at health, we need to look at it in a broad context. And when health should be viewed in the term, as I say, it shouldn't be the lack of, you know, health shouldn't be viewed in the sense that one needs to be unwell. That is not the way health should be viewed. Health should be viewed that people are not able to access medical services. People are not able to sit and just recuperate. You know, people have to be constantly on the go. You're worried about, you know, will you be harassed by the police? You're worried about, will you have to engage in transactional sex so that you can have a roof over your head? These are the things that we need to look at. We need to look at it in the broad context. So for people who are working in global health, that is what I would say. Don't take the Western medical model and take it to you know, fit it in or try to fit it in. It's about health is about people being able to thrive, the ability to thrive, the ability to maximize one potential, the ability to live in an environment that is conducive to one being the best that one can be, and that incorporates all the facets, you know, all the things that enable us to be our best.
Great, thank you. That is a really great answer. And Flora, do you have a response to that question? How can global people working in global health incorporate these conversations in their work?
Yeah, I think health has been the most isolated sector, I can say, in all this climate change and justice and migrant, because like we're trying to promote farmers and not using of chemicals and fertilizers, and the health sector has been always difficult to link this together. Like eating healthily, you wouldn't really need to be sick or go to see the doctor, and there are really healthy products that you can have and do not really need to be sick. So it's been difficult to link all this, but I think it is time really that everyone will have to talk about, eating healthily, because most of even in the European world, most of the products come from less developed countries, but there's never any link, you see, to say that this food come from less developed countries who are mostly farmers, you see. And in Africa, some of the women really understand that they take care of their health, and it's because they have organic food. And it's a sad thing because the media always portray as if Africa is so malnourished. But we are doctors ourselves when we are growing up. We did not need to see a doctor until it was a critical situation. And my mom, my dad laid down certain medication for us, which was found in all the herbs and all the food. And when you come into the Western countries, more about tablets and nothing else. There is no link between food and and what the tablets are made up of. Some people don't even actually know, not to talk of children in schools where the drugs are coming from. So I think the health sector has a lot to do. They need education, they need to open up, they need to accept that they have failed in that sector, and they need to really come together, because when you see asylum seekers, what they suffer from as well, they have a lot of health issues, because they are the people, because they don't have enough to live on. They will lack in nutrition, because they accept any type of food that is offered to them, which some of it is not really good food, and that impacts on their health straight away, and asylum seekers need all this in order to exist with the climate. So this has to be brought on the table, and I think that the global health really needs to talk about this more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Flora. And it looks like that's all the time that we have left for questions. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get to everyone's questions. We had some really great questions in the chat, but we haven't been able to get to all of them. So I just want to take a moment to thank our panelists, Angela, Flora and Yvonne, for all of your, all of the spirit and the energy that you bring to your work. And we really appreciate you coming together to share about the amazing campaigns that you are working on. Some of the things that I picked up in the discussions that we had, it was a really wide-ranging discussion, but a lot of the commonalities were about the importance of seeing all of these issues as interconnected, whether it's climate justice, migrant justice, food sovereignty, the immigration system, and so much more, colonialism, capitalism, seeing them all as interconnected parts of this issue, and also ensuring that I really liked about what Angela was talking about earlier, about how being able to engage with the media in this issue that you're campaigning on has really inspired people in other communities to see that the issue that you're facing in Southall is also affecting them as well. So coming together to work in coalition to address air pollution in people's communities is really vital. And so yeah, I was really blown away and inspired by everything that has been shared today. And I'm sure I've been seeing a lot of people posting in the chat how valuable this discussion has been to them. So I hope you all have an opportunity to read all the lovely words and compliments that people have left for you. And we'll share any links about we've already been sharing links to some of the things that have been mentioned, but we will also share if you would like, Angela, Flora and Yvonne, if you would like to share any links that haven't been mentioned in the chat, especially around actions that people in the audience can take to support the work you're doing. I remembered that, Angela, you mentioned that there's a protest in Southall on the 28th of November. So please do get involved in the campaigning work and that our amazing panelists are involved in. And there will also be a follow-up email after the event. So if there are any links that you want to share, please do share it in the chat. So I'm not going to take up much more of your time. This has been such an amazing event. Thank you everyone for giving up your Thursday evening to join us and explore these really important and vital issues and conversations. It's very topical, it's very timely, but we have to also remember that, as all of our panelists have said, the human impact of climate change is really important to address when we're having these conversations. And so I hope that you're able to take away lots of information, lots of tips and ideas, and also we've put all of the details of all of our panelists in the chat, and so you can get in touch with people after that. So yeah, that's it for this evening. Thank you everyone for being here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. And a massive big thank you to our panelists, Angela, Flora and Yvonne again. Have an amazing evening, everyone. Take care.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you guys for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.